Your hospitality is without bounds. I've been feeling so welcome just from the moment I arrived in Durham. I'm going to read this evening from several collections. The first, A Crazy Man Thinks He's Ernest in Paris, is a meditation on my brother. My brother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, lived on the streets, and fell through the cracks of the Canadian system. He disappeared. So this is for him. My birthday falls on Halloween. For years I have been haunted by the lost bones of a brother, the hellish flicker of light through lanterns, the orange maw of mouth. Each Hallows Eve, my hand hollows the flesh of pumpkins, carves the beastly thing from ear to ear. Pivotal points. My mother and I try to decide when the word crazy first came into our conversations. What precise ticking of the clock turned an ordinary event into something altogether defined by lunacy? Was it the random laughing at a joke that nobody got? The mysterious postcards with references to Egyptian goddesses as though they lived upstairs? The banging of black and white piano keys, some mish-mash of contemporary soundscape, the long, cool notes of the bamboo flute played at midnight. Could it have been his diet of nuts and dried fruit, the foul-tasting mixtures he left in the fridge, letters from friends he didn't have, making up stories of gladness? Maybe the black cape spreading its curves through a Toronto subway, the frenzied screech as he lunged at passers-by. What harm was a cape from a boy who read Batman comics, feet curled under his blanket in a third-floor bedroom with eaves? Devices have a way of deceiving. My brother came to mathematics through his hands. Meccano and erector sets, Lincoln logs, Tinker toys, the white, blue, yellow of Lego pieces, placing 4 rows to the left, 4 to the right, the precision of perfect numbers needed to build stairwells and roofs. Working past midnight on a grade school project, I remember him in the backyard, my father's flashlight over his head. Proportions and perspective alarming for an 8-year-old. Soon he needed a 5-foot ladder, the construction gaining balance and ballast as it grew. Even in rain, his small fingers clutching the pieces, a diagram spread out in his head. The oohing and ahhing began with the neighbors walking around the weeping willow to spy on the boy so curiously at work. Such a clever lad, they said. Genius. When I began the research for this book and delving into schizophrenia, of course I came to the amazing mathematician John Nash. Perhaps some of you know his life story. Perhaps some of you saw the film about his life. This is A Beautiful Mind for John Nash. He speaks in angles of light. The cryptic facts, an abstract webbing constructed of sinuous lines. The shores of his secret lakes, a pathos only orphans understand. He must have felt a trespasser among the fronds and leaves dangling above the water, and yet, on such a sunny day as this, he might have made things too clear. His vision, a masterful perception for the eyes, although the splendid sails of sight collapsed when the illegitimate children of his brain ran through fields of negative space. How did mathematics become so complicated? Did he mention love today? Did he count the shorebirds or measure the distance from head to navel to knees, understanding, as the great Da Vinci did, that Vitruvian man spread across a wheel imposed upon a square is no greater than the sum of all his parts, that divine equations are solved only by calculations in the dark, rendering all mortality to a blessed single cell. Vitruvian Man. In a book I have been reading about the life of Leonardo da Vinci, I find a human figure spread across a wheel imposed upon a square. Supposedly, the architect Vitruvius had much to do with this specific drawing, his theories gaining great support by those of mathematical inclination, who saw the relativity of numbers a divine gift, the measurement of body parts a golden means for humanly proportion. Perhaps the workings of the universe might be inscribed in these ratios, an inspiration for Bach's preludes, echoes from the heavens to drive musicians crazy with the wanting of its perfection. Music, just another name for math. And I'd like to read the centerpiece from the poem. A crazy man thinks he's earnest in Paris. I have a great love of Paris and the time of Ernest Hemingway and all the gang that lived there for many years. So somehow, and I had spent some time in the Luxembourg Gardens and in Paris, and so when I was writing this book, all of that swirled along with those voices from another time, within the voices and disfracture of my own brother's dissembling of mind. A crazy man thinks he's earnest in Paris. The last time you went to Europe, you might have been a crazy man, buying a liter of wine with bread and sausage, watching the men who fish between Ile Saint-Louis and Place de Vergelen, their long cane poles casting shadows across the Seine. Plump goujon, delicious, fried whole at the open-air restaurant, the view of the river as Sisley would have painted it. Gray skies and the great elms on the stone banks. Wherever you look, you find trees and bookstalls along the quay. The rental library and bookstore at Shakespeare and Company, 12 Rue de l'Odéon, shaking your memory like a fist through glass. You walk in the Luxembourg Gardens where there are no restaurants, where you might feel hungry in order to understand Cézanne and the writing of simple sentences that you might compose in a notebook in a cafe that is warm and clean and friendly and cheap. You walk where the horse chestnut trees are in bloom and the children play on graveled walks, their nurses sitting on benches. You keep a chestnut for luck and want only in the failing light to walk through the gardens and stop at the apartment of Miss Gertrude Stein, 27 Rue de Fleur, imagining her studio with art. Because you left your mind at home, you want only to listen to her opinions over liqueurs distilled from purple plums. You hear the voices of Eliot, Joyce, Pound, punctuated by the sound of the river glimmering with trout and the log-driven piles of the bridge. When the cold rains of winter come, and there is only the wet blackness of streets and the closed doors of small shops, you dream of teaching Ezra Pound how to box, how to throw a left hook into the darkness that is all around him. Thank you. This book like many books, spends a long time looking for a publisher, and I found Black Moss Press in Windsor, Ontario. Maybe I know that some of you in this room know Marty Gervais. And it was, it's a little book with a big message. I'm moving now to a collection called Day Moon Rising. I work for a foundation in Cambodia, the Tabitha Foundation. I've been going to Tabitha since 2000. And again, a Black Moss publication that begins to tell a little bit of the story. I'm going to read just a few poems from Day Moon Rising. The prologue is after Mary Oliver. It's called Wild Lotus. You do not have to be vigilant. You do not have to be aware of every little sign. You do not have to record the millions buried. It is an insurmountable task. You can't set down the facts. You can't go ghost hunting in the fields of minds. You can't even say you have a stake in this harvest. Whoever you are, know that the wild lotus that blooms in the filth of ponds is pure. This was the poem that I needed to write to give me permission somehow. I felt I needed to go to another country, another culture. I'm not a historian, I'm not a scholar. I'm a poet and a traveler and a worker. At this moment, incense smoke drifts, spins, unravels in the air scented with sandalwood, sliced ginger. Lobby of the Golden Gate Hotel, number 8, Street 278, Phnom Penh. Beneath a basho leaf, 100 spiders move slowly on their threads. Grenade parts, AK-47s, photocopied girly mags in the Russian market, stacks of silk, prostheses, turning midair a flock of starlings. Under a yellow umbrella, 2 monks glide off the curb. Stop to light incense at the spirit house on the corner between the gas station and the foreign bookstore, a small ceremony of remembrance. At this moment, my mind swings like a Nikon 84. When I say here, I mean the ringing of a Buddhist bell, light opening a red camellia, bones of children buried in killing fields, day moon rising. This is very, very important in working in the fields in Cambodia because it's a hand-woven cotton. And the workers who are in the fields, who are out in the outer provinces beyond the 2 main cities in Cambodia, wear these to protect their heads from the sunshine. I thought if you actually saw the krama, when I use it in the poem, you'll have a sense of what it means. You wrap it around your head this way. A woman from the village steps forward. Performance art. Here, I might call it village art. A woman steps forward, sunlight spilling from trees. She removes the red and white checkered Tabitha krama from my neck, lowers it to a cistern of water. By midday, a push of heat. We shine like the gecko's clack, every insect stirring in dirt. The woman from the village wraps wet cloth around my head, her scarred hands a cup. Like all good theater, I am a part, yet a part of this play, revolutionary, her own krama forced on villagers at the scourge of Pol Pot. Her tongue makes little clicking sounds. The critic of my soul raves. I'm not sure if some of you know the Vancouver-based poet Kate Braid. Kate Braid is a woman who is a master carpenter. She teaches carpentry at the Vancouver Community Center. She's a fabulous poet and a wonderful friend. And I wrote this poem for her. Unaccustomed as I am. I do not know the power of weight, the ease to drive nails. I have not found my rhythm on the hollow bamboo floor. I do not know the coal-powered steel, the hickory grain, titanium, T-bone, curved, long, straight, rip claw, curved claw, drywall, sledge, the setting hammer, raising hammer, finish, framing. I have not studied the carpenter's course. I do not mix cement. Yet, in Prey Vong jungles, Western Cambodia, I am part of a house-building team. Will bandage my wrists and thumbs to haul stilts, bend tin to wrap around walls. My handsome est-wing, forged from metal, leather-wrapped, clangs by midday, echoes in an air filled with dragonflies, scent of white orchid. I am trying to keep sweat out of my eyes. My mind off water break. I'm going to share a new poem written this past summer called Letters of War. 1. My father must have spotted them in a small Sicilian town that summer of war on his march to North Africa. Such a knock in his blood, noticing the wooden horses from across the road in a bombed-out storefront sagging in heat. How carefully he wrapped them in Italian newspapers. Perhaps the rain would come. My father carried the wooden horses across the channel from Messina to Tunisia, thoughts of my mother catching in waves. Carved horses staring into the world with the sadness of war, like letters from the dead, wizened and torn, the darkened eyes turned away from the sun. The stories of boys who carve horses in war, for vino, for pasta, who carve the names of dead mothers, Maria, Lucia, into the manes of horses, embroidered with stars and red wool, wood from an orange tree, a grove overlooking the sea. 3 years before I was born, my father caressed the faces of horses on a ferry boat crossing the Mediterranean. Silently, he sang in the fearful night to the women whose names were cut into wood, the names of women he would never love. 2. The young carver searches for stone in the quarry. He is drawn to a piece of rough marble, the birds high above him. The hand of the carver remembers seraph and sans seraph, the way bees carry the memory of honey. Dreaming Garamond, Bodoni, he carries a template of design on paper, paper he holds to the sun. The rounded O, like the plums on his mother's table, the breast of the girl he loves. Waterfall slide of the powerful W, the way a shovel lifts dirt for the grave. And the loneliness of L, waiting in the piazza to pray for the souls of the dead. Light tendrils into night. The birds make their way to trees. In the morning, he will take his letters to the village square, sell them to soldiers for bread. 3. After my mother died, I found my father's letters from Sicily and Rome, wrapped in black lace in a shoebox. He did not write of the Northern Campaign, the Allied bombing of Palermo. He omitted the facts of Ortona, Monte Cassino. Instead, he described the bridge where Dante glimpsed Beatrice, the bakery that sold biscotti, a soft white turroni made without sugar, the breads with rosemary, oregano, potato, He wrote of doorways to churches, their stained windows of light, the way he paused one afternoon to speak to a shop girl, fumbling for the exact coins he might need to purchase black lace. Perhaps she smiled. Perhaps the sun was shining. He always signed, Te amo. It's such a privilege to share work that you spend squirreled away alone in a little room, just working and changing and trying to figure out if the poem works. But when I look out and I see people smiling, and then there's this great connection. It's very emotional to read. I want you to know it's a fabulous thing. I'm going to close with some Japanese forms. Tanka is a great, great Japanese form. It's 5 lines, and it was originated by the women of Japan. It's an erotic form of poetry. I will never be able to do it justice. Ono no Kamachi was the great Japanese. She was a beautiful, beautiful woman. She had lovers always. Even when she was an old, old woman, she was writing the most beautiful tanka about herself and her love and the cosmos that she lived in. And I have tried in this collection, hallelujah, to bring my own understanding and to bring my own life experience to my own tanka. So I'm going to read a tanka series, and then I'm going to close with a few short haiku. And again, a huge thank you for this wonderful chance to share my work. The tanka sequence is called The Music from Your Mouth. In sickness and in health, so many years ago, your hippie hair long on our wedding day. So much worry about your transplanted organ. No time to appreciate this cherry petal season. Topless, I serve you breakfast in bed, wishing the grapefruit were larger. I peel the grapefruit into a perfect treble clef, the discord of frequent migraines and nausea. Despite angry words, I still hear the music from your mouth. So long since you have smiled, if only Cassiopeia could light your way. I guess with all this talk about haiku, yeah, I better put my mouth where my money is, right? So I'm going to share a few haiku. Something that I want to say in closing around haiku is a very, very ancient art form, and as much a part as the focus on the moment is a haiku silence. So I will offer you silence before I read a haiku and a silence after, and I'd ask that we just refrain till the very end so that the haiku can sit in the air, just small, fleeting images. End of summer. The great blue heron stretches into its own shadow. Water urn. A candle's flicker drowns itself. Moon, half hidden in the clouds. My mother's cancer tests. Alone in Tokyo, even the chopsticks in pairs. Mountain cold, unzipping my sweater to let your hands in. Traveling in Asia, homesick for peanut butter sandwiches. And the clothes. Street kids. My camera brings them home.